Hello and welcome to It's a Code U, mental health support for those working in healthcare. This is a podcast created for healthcare employees to explore not only issues relating to mental and emotional health, but also unique challenges that those working in healthcare are faced with. Your hosts are Adina Tucker, a licensed clinical social worker with Dartmouth Health, and Jennifer Hinsey, an MSW also with Dartmouth Health. Hello and welcome to It's a Code U. Summer is here, and with that comes vacations, or at least the thoughts of one. Upticks in weddings, buying and selling homes or moving away, gardens growing, festivals, the urge to get outdoors, and all sorts of patterns of life typically supercharged by warmer weather and more sunlight. For many, the call to do more beyond the desk, whether that's for fun or out of life necessity, means taking real time off and away from work, which realistically can feel like a burden and a barrier for so many people. That's why today's episode will explore the difficulty we may experience with taking the time we need. The idea is deceptively simple: taking time off of work. And whether it's one day, a long week, or an extended leave of absence, it's something so many of us struggle to do. Not because we don't want to rest or recover or have a life outside of work, but because of guilt, responsibility, and fear can make what's absolutely necessary to our health, well-being, and life feel almost impossible to attain.
Well, let's start with the obvious. Healthcare does not stop. There's always going to be another shift, another patient, another emergency, paperwork. And for many of those working in healthcare, taking time off doesn't really feel like a break. Maybe it feels more like abandoning our post. And this can feel especially true for folks who work in understaffed units, or maybe they're in a solo role, or even in rural areas or specialized teams, because taking even just a single day off can mean patients will lose continuity of care, or perhaps your colleagues are picking up extra burden at work. Now, in our work with therapy clients, we've actually heard versions of this often. If I take a day off, everything changes for my patient, or I feel like I'm letting my team down when I go on vacation, and I'm the only one trained to handle this piece of the job. If I'm not there, it could all fall apart. Now, by and large, healthcare workers avoid taking time off due to fears about patient outcomes and the extra workload placed on their coworkers. And there is a lot of research that bears this out. The U.S. Surgeon General's advisory addressing health worker burnout, which was published in 2022, reported that many healthcare workers come to work sick rather than taking time off to heal because of a desire to not burden their colleagues with additional work, a belief that it's unprofessional to take a sick day, them not wanting to disappoint patients, and even sometimes a fear of being ostracized by colleagues. A 2023 survey by the Pew Research Foundation found that nearly half of workers who have paid time off say they typically take less time off than their employer offers. About half of these workers say they don't feel they need to take more time off, or they worry they might fall behind at work if they took additional time off. Now, some 43% said that they feel badly about their coworkers taking on extra work, while smaller shares have some concerns that taking more time off might hurt their chances for things like a job advancement. They might risk losing their job entirely, or say that their manager or supervisor actually discourages them from taking that time off. Adina, do you have any thoughts or personal experiences when you've perhaps struggled to take some time off?
I think at some point in my career, I worked in inpatient hospitals doing discharge planning. And one thing that I found was difficult is because, at least in the hospitals that I worked in, each unit would have a discharge planning care management team. Not all hospitals do things the same way, but so if you were gone, then people would be just managing your caseload or your unit while you were gone. And I am type A, and I also previously worked for the government. So I'm under the whole guise of if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So I used to try to be pretty meticulous, and also because I want anyone who picked up what I was working on to be able to look at it, know exactly what had been done. Not everyone operates that way. So that was one thing that whenever I would, especially if there was like some difficult case patient discharges on, and I had to not be there, I would always be super stressed about it because I would come back and it would take me several hours just to figure out what was even going on. And then also there is that guilt of, okay, well, I like these people I work with and they're going to be overburdened with me taking a couple of days off. And so it's that it is hard because there people in healthcare are overworked. And so I do feel like that whole guilt about taking time off or even the anticipation of coming back and all the things waiting for you because you don't just have to sift through those, you also have to be ready on a dime to deal with whatever's already there. So that can be very, very difficult.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That seems like it would, yeah, that sounds like a lot to balance.
Jennifer, do you have any personal things to share about any anxieties or struggles you've had with taking time off work?
You know, actually, something very recent, something that's happening right now as we speak. So, as you know, Adina, I'm coming up on taking some maternity leave. And I mean, really, in my whole adult working life, this will be the longest leave of absence I've taken from a job. And that is very daunting. And a lot of these things, right, that we mentioned just at the beginning of the episode here, all things swirling through my mind, right? And it's interesting too because it's like maternity leave. I can't just be at my desk and have a baby and keep it moving. I mean, it's truly, truly, truly essential time. I mean, all of our time off is essential, one way or the other. But really, just trying to ground myself in that, and not not trying to do so many different mental gymnastics where I'm trying to validate it by making it worthy to take this pause, right? Like it can just be worthy because it is, and that's okay, you know. So yeah, that's been something to wrestle with for sure.
Yeah, it's that is an extended period of time, but you want to focus on, you know, your new baby and all the baby things.
Yeah, 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 it's important, right? Important. And also, right, I feel like I need to acknowledge it's definitely a privilege to be able to take a large amount of time for maternity leave for sure. Because I know in so many people's lives that amount of time or even having any time at all doesn't exist, which is a real problem in our culture, in our country, for sure.
Well, and previously related to that, I'll just share this in case anyone else is this is resonates with anyone else who's works in well at all, but even in healthcare. So I used to work for a medical center, but I worked in an outpatient clinic. And every time I would have to, as you know, towards the end of your pregnancy, you have weekly appointments. And sometimes you have more than weekly appointments, depending on what's going on with your pregnancy or if you're interviewing pediatricians, all that fun stuff. And the director of the program was very aggravated with me for any time I would need to. She was just like, I don't understand why you have to go to the doctor so much. It seems unnecessary. So it was already that kind of experience. But then I got pregnant and I was like a little bit shy of being there a year when my due date was. So I didn't qualify for FMLA. So they were like, well, you can take 6 weeks. I tried to say, well, could I come back part time for a little bit? And they were just like, no. And so at the time I was not making a ton of money. I mean, this was almost 18 years ago in my career. And I was a social worker, which, is not all social work jobs like pay very well. I also was commuting when there wasn't traffic, 45 minutes. So when there was traffic, it would take me an hour and a half. And daycare in the area where I lived was like, I figured out. And by the time I paid for daycare and gas and stuff, I was only going to make a couple $100 a month. So I ended up just quitting altogether. And that's how I became a stay-at-home mom for 10 years because financially it just didn't. And it was definitely a struggle for us because we had to like really budget and there was a lot of things we couldn't do. But I know a lot of people are faced with that kind of decision where you're not even allotted any time. And then it's hard. I feel like we, by we, I mean society, makes it very hard for us, for people to take care of themselves and do what is just like human basic care. The National Academy of Medicine launched the Action Collaborative on Clinician Well-Being and Resilience to promote education and awareness around the importance of clinician wellness, recognizing that the health of providers is vital to delivering safe, high-quality care. However, the collaborative highlights a deeply concerning trend. High levels of burnout are affecting healthcare workers across the board. Reports indicate that between 35 and 54% of nurses and physicians and 45 to 60% of medical students and residents are experiencing significant burnout. Using PTO days as mental health days can help reset feelings of being emotionally and mentally exhausted. So let's talk a little bit about the emotional weight, right? The guilt, identity, and invisible pressure. So, why does stepping away from work feel so personal? Well, first of all, it's not always about leaving behind a large workload for our coworkers to absorb. If you're listening right now and you work or have worked in the healthcare field, you're probably all too familiar with the profession's culture of self sacrifice. While empathy, compassion, and dedication are hallmarks of patient care, these qualities can lead to working too hard, not taking time off, and burning out. Healthcare has long held a culture of silence around discussing mental health, burnout, and well being while expecting the workforce to simply accept the high stress conditions. In an article published by the Leeds Business School in England at the beginning of this year, Dr. Esther Bolt, a postdoctoral research fellow at Leeds University who examines the relationship between nurse identity and their well being, found that nurses often push themselves so hard to meet their patients' needs that they neglect their own health. Nursing often reinforces the culture of self sacrifice with an unspoken expectation that nurses should prioritize patient needs, which often does come at the expense of personal well being. And although Dr. Bolt's work studies a population that's across the pond, there's no denying the shared culture between American healthcare and nursing profession and that of the UK. Dr. Bolt's interviews with nurses, which highlight the emotional toll of this. Several nurses mention feeling guilt when calling in sick, knowing their patients and colleagues depend on them. Some described how increased workloads due to colleagues' absences eventually left them too overworked to continue. Others reported being constantly contacted to work extra shifts, even on their days off, due to staffing shortages caused by absenteeism and turnover. Secondly, for many healthcare professionals, their work is more than a job, it's an identity, it's purpose. It's sometimes the only space where we feel competent, needed, or appreciated. It also means acknowledging the emotional weight we carry, something few outside of healthcare or medicine can truly understand. Healthcare professionals experience the joys and losses alongside patients and team members in a way that is deeply personal, and that can make time off feel threatening, even if we don't name it that way. There can be extra tension in trying to completely separate work and life, forcing ourselves to switch off our patient care identities, making achieving a work life balance even harder. Dr. Santina Wheat recommends instead of creating rigid boundaries, we should focus on integrating our identities in a way that feels sustainable. So, how might we do this when considering taking time away from work? This will be highly individual to what works and feels best for your life, but perhaps it looks like setting some parameters on how often you check in on work matters or work email when you're taking dedicated time off. You don't restrict yourself from doing so entirely, but you pick a particular day or time to catch up on anything emergent or pertinent. And perhaps you limit this window to 1 hour. Maybe it's a quick text to a good coworker for a little reassurance that everything and everyone is still above water while you're out of the office.
Those tips, it does make it seem a lot more sustainable. than, completely switching off. Yeah, the identity that a lot of healthcare workers carry into all facets of their life, not just when they're in the clinic or on the job. Now let's talk about what we can do about it. Well, first we can name it. Taking time off in healthcare is emotionally and systemically hard, and we shouldn't gaslight ourselves by pretending that it's not. But we can also get curious about where the story came from. Whose needs are you prioritizing? And what would it mean to let yourself rest, even if the system keeps on spinning? Next, let's get a little practical. Here are some things you can do this week to begin shifting your relationship to rest and time off. First, acknowledge the guilt you might be feeling. That doesn't mean you have to obey it. You could simply say to yourself, I can feel guilty and still take care of myself. You can also plan for your absence with clarity, not with apology. Your out of office email can be brief and clear. I'm away and offline to recharge. I will return on such and such date. Thank you for understanding, period. You could schedule a transition buffer. So maybe block 30 to 60 minutes on your first day back for reorienting yourself to the job, to what's been going on while you've been out. You don't owe your full self the very moment that you return. You're allowed to take some time to catch up. And it's important to do that too. Try micro rest if longer leave isn't possible. This might look like taking just 10 minutes alone with your phone off. Perhaps it's a little walk in the middle of your day, or a 1 day boundary around messaging. Small rests matter too. And talking about this with your peers. Let's normalize taking time off and prioritizing rest. Perhaps it could be made a topic in huddles or staff meetings, because rest can become easier when it's modeled. Now let's try a reframe. Time off is not selfish, it's sustainable. Time off is not abandonment, it's recalibration. And when you're taking time off, you're not stepping away from care. You're stepping back so you can return with greater capacity. One way to visualize this is you can think of yourself as a well. You draw water for everyone, patients, coworkers, family. But if you never refill that well, you might run dry. So taking time off is digging deeper and replenishing that water. And you don't owe anyone an apology for maintaining your own humanity. Even one day, one real day, where you're not responding to messages, not overfunctioning, can reset your nervous system and your sense of self.
Let's talk about some mindset shifts to help manage that time away guilt. So, Catherine Lee, a New York based mental health counselor, shares the following mindset shifts that can set you up for success and relieve guilt while taking time away from work. Good work is not rewarded by rest. Rest precedes good work. Rest is productive, and we cannot produce good work if we are depleted. Another mindset shift is release control. There are things you cannot control, especially when you are working with a team. Let go and trust that you and they are competent to respond to situations that may arise. The next shift is you cannot please everyone. And I'm sure if you work in healthcare, you're well aware of this one. So shifting this to use in a different way might be pretty easy. As much as you'd like to please everyone, it's impossible. Prioritize you and your needs instead. And lastly, perfection is impossible. Everything might not be tied in a neat bow for your departure, but remember, that's okay. And the last thing we want to talk about is just giving yourself permission. So we'll end it here with permission. If no one has said this to you lately, you are allowed to take time off. You are allowed to feel tired. You are allowed to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, not because you're selfish, but because your well being matters just as much as anyone you care for. Your time off is not a disruption, it's a declaration. I am a human being, not a machine. And we need more of that humanity in healthcare. Take care of yourself. You deserve it. Thank you so much for listening today. If you have any feedback or questions or something you'd like us to cover, you can reach out to us at dhbhs.media@hitchcock.org. And we hope you have a wonderful day.